how did you get into film?
So when I was in high school, I used to do photography and I used to take pictures just around my neighborhood and my community. Um, I used to do wedding videography, and then after undergrad, I put together a portfolio of all the work I had kind of created throughout my entire life and applied to film school. And I did my MFA in film and dramatic writing at Syracuse University, and I made three short films. And Homegoing would be my very fourth film and my first film outside of film school.
All right. So where are you from?
Born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio.
And how'd you get to Syracuse? 'Cause most people don't just go to like upstate New York to go to school.
Yeah, I mean, Syracuse has a really incredible film program. I was able to, have my education completely funded, which was an incredible opportunity. So, and it gave me time to really just focus on my craft and hone in on like the different skills I wanted to learn and like figure out my voice as an artist. Syracuse is a really small city, so there's not a lot happening there. So it was a great place to really be a student and kind of grow.
Okay. So not a party atmosphere.
I mean, there's definitely that, but
not to be confused.
I mean that's pretty much on every college campus, but
pretty much, Syracuse has a rep.
Yeah.
I won't dig into it though. So when you were a photographer, going from photography to film, did you find that it was more about you having control of what was happening?
I think photography is a great way to kind of get started in film because you kind of learn some of the fundamentals like lighting techniques, and you learn about aperture and focal length. You learn about lenses and exposure, and it's just kind of you use a lot of the same components in photos as you do with filmmaking. So it was kind of like a great foundation really for my art as a filmmaker, because you learn those basic skills that you pretty much need.
Yeah. All right. So you make some films in school. You come out of school, make this film. Why was this message and this story important to you?
That's a great question. I really, when writing Homegoing, it was a reflection on my own experiences. I had worked at Black funeral homes, throughout my entire young adulthood. It was my very first job, probably outside of or during high school. Black funeral homes are very unique in the sense that their business is not beholden to white power structures. They're usually businesses passed down from generation to generation. They've been in their communities, they've been in their families for years, and they're always willing to give people jobs, which I appreciated. So, it was one of my very first jobs, and I really wanted to write about that experience because I was so moved by not only the community and the people who, I saw come in the establishment, but I was moved by the family who actually owned the business. And I thought this was something that was very unique and special that we rarely get to see, in our communities. So I really wanted to kind of explore a story around the family who owned that business.
Okay. How old were you when you worked at a funeral home?
I think my first funeral job, I was probably 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
Me at 16, I would have probably been terrified being in a funeral home. How did you? I don't want to say survive because that just sounds like the wrong word. How did you adjust to being in that environment? Because a lot of people, again, at that age, you can't really accept what death is, and to have to see that on a daily basis in all age ranges, all different sexes, things like that. How did you adjust to that?
It was a little challenging at first. I mean, I remember the very first time the funeral director asked me to come in and help him, dress a body. And I was mortified. I was probably shaking, my hands got all clammy and sweaty, and I was like, really? But I think you just kind of, once you get over that first hump, it's not as bad. And and you see it every day. It becomes almost normalized, and it really helps you learn about life and look at life differently when you're in a funeral home, because you're surrounded by so much death. It gives you more of an appreciation for the life you live and the people around you and your community and your family, and to make the most out of each day, because this is inevitable. It's the one thing that's promised to all of us at some point.
Right. And it's kind of
okay. It made me it didn't make me fearful of death. It gave me more of an understanding around death and grief, and
because it's interesting, like you said, it's an industry that is typically family owned, and typically life passed down generation to generation, which is something that you showed in your film, but with the passing down of it, it's like the generation accepting it wasn't necessarily wanting to take it on. Did you, when you were in that industry, did you see that a lot? Like, it's not really something that you're sure that you want to do, but it's something that the family has created, so you don't want to let it go at the same time.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of family members who work in the industry and who work in their family's funeral homes, and it's like they all have this very similar, unique story where they're almost always drawn back to that place. It's like they're always at a point where they reject the business and they reject, following in their parents' footsteps and taking over the funeral home. But it's like life happens and they come back to it at some point. It's like, and I think that's incredible, because the fact that whatever happens in your life, whatever challenges you may face or may arise, you always have this safety net that can catch you with the family business.
Right.
And not something that a lot of us as Black people were afforded. So it's pretty incredible. You always see family members come back, or certain family members you might not expect find interest in the business, but that's how they're passed down from each generation.
And you actually touched on that as well in the movie, when you have your main character and his best friend having a conversation, and he's saying to him how he doesn't really know if he wants to dress dead bodies the rest of his life. And his best friend is like, at least your family left you something. All my dad left me was death.
Yeah.
That line was just like a wow moment, because it's like one person sees the opportunity and the other person sees that opportunity as a weight or a burden.
Yeah.
Why that line?
I mean, at its core, with this film, I really wanted to touch on, the ramifications of structural racism in Black and brown communities, and specifically the racial wealth gap. White families in America have inherited property and inherited businesses for so long, and Black communities, we were always renters. We didn't own land, we didn't own property. With Jim Crow, with slavery, we didn't have generations upon generations of wealth that was passed down. Even just the home, a home that you pass down to your kids makes a significant difference in opportunities for your future. So I really wanted to touch on that, that it's not something that we have as Black people. It's not really common, but it's really a gem that the character has, that his father's passing this business down to him, but he doesn't realize what he has until he has that conversation with his friend who he says his father only left him debt. And that's the truth in the experience of so many people, in America.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to touch on that racial wealth gap, because it's something that's it's going to take a long time for us to break out of, and white Americans already have so much of an advantage when we talk about white privilege. Like, that's at the core of it. you were given an advantage in this race called life, that we're always 10 steps behind because of that.
Yeah. Now, when they're having that conversation, and you ultimately in this car ride, you see that that's where the conversation is going. That's kind of what the underlining issue is, and now you're exploring that aspect of this short film. And then you start to piece together the relationship between the two friends as you go further along in there. Because I don't want to give the movie away.
Okay.
Is there a relationship there, or is it just like a understood kind of relationship? Is it just a friendship, and it's just like a deep caring kind of friendship, or is there something that's actually there?
That's a great question you pose, and I want to leave that up for interpretation to the audience. What I will say is that it was really important for me to show the softness and the intimacy and the love between Black men, something we rarely get to see in film and television. I wanted to show that because we have that with our friendships, with our romantic partners. We rarely see us being soft and vulnerable with each other. And I really wanted to portray that because we have that with our own friendships that we see, in your own life or behind closed doors. But in media, we're never portrayed as being loving and open with each other like that. So I really wanted to show that closeness and that bond. So I think it's up for interpretation for whatever the audience may see it.
Okay, because the third time I watched it, I was like, I'm sensing something. And it was, because the first time it's just like, I missed so much. And that's what I think I told you this. I was eating while I was watching the movie. And because I wasn't paying attention, I'm like missing stuff. So when the movie ended, I was like, hold the hell on, rewind. And then I had to watch it again. And then I caught a lot of what I missed. And then it's like something still didn't click, so I rewound it again and then watched it the third time and was like, this is deep. There's a lot involved in this 15 minutes, the short. That 15 minutes, there was a lot packed in there. And a lot of it was just underlining kind of things, and then you just really catch it all.
Yeah, thank you. That's the effect that I wanted to leave with viewers.
Yeah, so I had about
I like to make you think about the world differently and yourself differently.
Yeah.
It's not white and black. You have to really think about things and look at things a little bit deeper.
Right. And then there's something huge that you did in this. So Tupac's, first major movie was Juice.
Right.
And he did that, and Khalil Kain was other star of the movie. So for him now, growing from where he grew in Juice to his career at this point, and then you take Tupac's nephew Malik, and his first film is now with Tupac's co-star from his first film. So it's like you have this connection around a person, a megastar basically, and it's all going in the same direction. And I know you said that they didn't know each other before then, but they connected during the project.
Right.
Was that intentional on your part to cast those two, or is it something that literally just happened and it just, after it happened, you're like, holy hell, this is these two people?
Yeah, it was definitely intentional. Like you said, the film stars Malik Shakur, who was the nephew of the late Tupac Shakur, and Khalil Kain. And, as you know, Khalil and Tupac had that wonderful moment back in '92 when they started the film Juice, directed by Ernest Dickerson. So, yeah, it was very intentional because, we wanted to further that conversation that Ernest Dickerson was having 30 years ago with Juice about Black men, about Black friendships, about structural racism in Black communities. We wanted to further that conversation from our point of view in 2020. From my point of view as a Black queer artist, this is kind of my reimagining or revisioning of a continuation of that story.
Yeah.
Because I'm a huge fan of Jews. And I think it's such an important film because it highlights, like I said, it highlights that intimacy between Black men in our friendships. It highlights, the issues of gun violence, but Homegoing gives you a deeper understanding of why things like gun violence take place in those communities, a deeper understanding of that structural racism that's in place. And we really need to start having these discussions if we want to make changes in our community, because I think 2020 has been such a monumental year where people are trying to, if nothing else, at least hear us when we're talking about the fight against structural racism, because it's operating on honestly every level of human life.
Yeah.
And that people don't understand. It's in our housing, in our education, in our criminal justice system. It's operating everywhere. And my film just touches on a very small piece of that with the racial wealth gap, with the racialized policing. But, we really wanted to further that conversation that Dickerson had with you, because it's a very important conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah. Now, your film starts and ends with the same scene. Did you want it? Was it done in the way of being a flashback of that moment and just kind of explaining why you're starting here and then going through it again? Because again, he's at a point where, okay, I don't want to give the movie away. Because I think for me, that's the part where when it happened, I was like, wait a minute, and I had to go back and take it back in again. We'll skip that question.
Okay.
So where all have you shown the film thus far?
Yeah, so the film has so far screened at Palm Springs International Film Festival, Outfest Fusion, and the Atlanta Film Festival. We have a couple more things coming up in the future that we can't discuss just yet, but we will be part of the Outfest Screenwriting Lab. So I have adapted this short film into a feature-length screenplay, and it's currently going to be in a lab where they're going to workshop the script, and we're actually going to do a live reading of a few scenes from the film with real actors, hopefully with Khalil and hopefully with Malik. We can bring them together and we can share that with the world. Because
Congrats on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
The next step is to continue the film and to adapt it into a feature length. So, we're looking for production companies and financiers and investors who can really help make this film a reality. So that's what we'll be coming in the next year.
All right. And a lot of people don't realize how challenging that is. They think that you just make the film and you're done. It's a lot of work after you're done to roll the film.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of patience. But you have to, and being a first-time filmmaker, like this screenwriting lab is really important. Filmmaker labs and writing labs are important because as a first-time feature filmmaker, it really it helps people understand, okay, this person is actually about their business. I mean, it's almost like a stamp of approval or validation that my work is worth exploring and being financed and funded, because when you're working as an independent filmmaker, I can't just walk into a studio and say, hey, I could use $100,000 or $200,000 to make my feature. You kind of have to prove yourself, and labs like this are really important because they help you do that, and they help mentor you through the process of doing that and finding the support you need to get the film made.
Yeah. And you actually, with this film, if I'm not mistaken, you've won some awards already with it, correct?
Not yet, but hopefully later.
Okay. So it's coming. You have your goals with the film. I know we spoke about you wanting to continue the conversation and getting into a feature-length film. You have other goals that are set with Homegoing?
Yeah, so like I said, our goal is to definitely develop this into a feature-length film. But thinking long-term, it would be even awesome to develop this into a scripted series on television. I think about people like Justin Simeon, who made his very first feature, Dear White People, and then it was adapted into an incredible episodic series on Netflix. Because there's so much that you can explore with the Black Funeral Home. There's so much you can explore about our communities and about our people, and exploring death and grief from the perspective of a young Black queer man. It says so much, and the feature is my very first. That's what we're working towards right now. That's what we're striving towards. But looking long term, it would be great to adapt this into a television show as well.
Nice. All right. So for you, what do you want out of your career ultimately? Like, you want to just make a bunch of films and a lot more projects. You have a lot to say, and do that through your work. Like, what's the goal for you individually?
The goal for me is to continue telling stories. I started making films, and I became a filmmaker because I wanted to tell stories. And filmmaking is my advocacy. Filmmaking is my activism. It's important for me to really speak up for my community and speak up for those who don't have a platform through my art. But I also want to entertain and show the joy and show the happiness and the beauty within our communities, within our people as Black people of the diaspora. I want to continue telling stories and shaping the culture and just making art that really resonates with people, that makes people feel and makes people laugh and cry and really reflect on our that's just the human experience that is universal to really all people, but particularly showcasing the stories of Black folks and queer folks, of people, of women and different Black people just throughout the world. I think art is something that can really unite us as people, as a community, and that's really what I strive to do with my work.
Nice. And how can people connect with you to help build that community and get to your work?
Support Black filmmakers, support people who are doing these things. My film screened at Atlanta and Palm Springs, and there'll be more coming up. And when we have the Outfest Screenwriting Lab, buy tickets and show up for different artists of color who are really working, independently to tell stories. You can follow me on Instagram at Carlton Daniel Jr. And stay in touch and follow what's happening with Homegoing. But really, if you have friends or if you know people or if you're a fan of art, support your Black and brown artists who are doing it by themselves, because it really takes a village. We can't do what we want without the support of you guys.
Absolutely.